It may come as a surprise that the life that you live is really spotless, but littered with a lot of information from the news. I think it's like one of the great American pastimes watching the news, and I enjoy it myself. The repetition of seeing the same newscaster is part of its draw. I had thought that perhaps when I came back from whatever I was doing and caught the news in the afternoon on television, that maybe there was something that I had thought about which included some of my traits from watching the news and liking that into the rest of my day by the time I came back to watch the news again. It's a bit of a parody, though, some of the processes that take place, what's capable of being on the news and what's not. As a matter of fact, these blogs that many of you actually read, or video blogs, is that's short for video blog, has kind of culminated into a world that actually looks at the situation from a point of view that's derived from not watching the news or listening to any of it. There can be a lot of people thinking about one thing, and there are people who think about one thing, and they get a lot of that ideology from the politics they show on news. Then again, there's your childhood, and having grown up as an adult, the news is so much more different than something to entertain you, like when you were younger. So, the situation is kind of like a parable of a park with a couple of old men, or a few, or several, who are having a talk, and they bring up conversations, and it might be about lewd women. The conversation about that little projection I show you is near as much as what I saw during my sort of transition from a child into an adult around the year 2000. And I remember there being all kinds of websites out there, fan sites for bands and fan sites for celebrities. And then there was also all the stuff about tradition and culture. And what it was always kind of getting at was that these homepages have a life of their own. And it's a matter of cause that people claim that they put them up there, and people are somehow devout to that sort of following. And then there was all this cultish kind of material and this millennialism kind of material. A lot of it dealing with creation versus the Big Bang Theory and the theory of evolution was kind of a shared concept inside both of those arguments. It's like I was watching something take place in a Calvin and Hobbes book. I used to read that. I also started watching out for the cat and Garfield, and I thought it was very funny, having collected so many of those Garfield books, that I had really thought maybe there were actual incentives around reading it alone as a child versus reading it as an adult. And it hadn't crossed my mind that one day I probably wouldn't be into it so much anymore. But at least I have that memory with me, and I keep it. A lot of the subject matters is on the news seems almost subliminal, and it seems to follow a certain type of scenario that maybe this person likes watching Melissa Benoist on Supergirl, or this person likes watching a certain preacher or pastor on Sunday, and it's all not for show, but it's really actually all there to begin with concerning a dialect that's spoken within the English tongue. Having said that, I was always more interested in letting people know about day's current events. I was always kind of looking at the current events sort of like it was a postulate for companionship or some other thought of reasoning dealing with the population sort of get along with each other, and myself feeling a little bit kind of consort to the whole ambiguity about people in general, but not including my friends. The concept gets laid back on a certain person, and in religion you call that Mary, and she has a lot of slack to take, and it's like you have the debate surrounding Monica Lewinsky, and it's about politics, and people take their side or they feel entertained. And what's actually like that in religion is that it's an event that always already took place, and nobody can really put a finger on its actual compromise about how it's near and dear to your heart, and you may or may not have missed it. So there are reasons to believe, as I had gone to church when I was younger several times, and I felt that it was all pretty much to deal with the people in the pews and not really so much to deal with the story being told from the pulpit, as they use the Bible for their sermons and direction. After I look at some of these modern day cliches, I have to actually fall back on how people play video games. There's this interesting game called Warsaw, and there's another game called Nexia, and another game called Zonta. I like Warsaw because it has this really interesting level in it, and the characters are very animated and lifelike. And for any of the information that you pick up from that, there's always a story to be told about unity in this country. I would like to say something about that. It's kind of a foreign concept because of the languages they speak in other countries, not having a direct translation into such words like government or police, but using English as a scenario to replicate that ideology a little bit, like the elections for 2020. And if you catch that on TV, you might be a little impressed at how forlorn it is to actually sit there and believe in all the candidates at the same time, like it's more what they say, a certain cliche, that the more popular gentleman wins. No word on a female president, but that's not really what's at stake, because I think people are pretty much primary on that concern, as you've seen it already take place with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. After so much is laying in on the table, as you might guess, there are actual sequences inside chat log and chat scripts which call for a certain sense of humor. And for as much as you might think day-to-day living is somewhat tranquil and easy and restful, there's also another part of initiative that takes place with people, excluding my friends, that have myself in regard as the same scenario for what it's worth about boyfriends and girlfriends, or husbands and wives, or the spouse situation altogether. I can't really relay to you anything else further about your complimentary coincidence, as you have maybe not really realized that the women are also listening too. They're called girls, and some people like to French them as females. Well, in a scenario about the field, what I actually left out were actually not included to begin with, because I did mention women, but older women and how old. So that's really where the popularity about shared existence takes off, and about how kind people are because they go to church. And it was always a belief of mine when I was younger that there was something called, as another cliche, a mean Christian. And for any of the jokes that come out, it's something sounds like that. Knock, knock, who's there? Woody Woodpecker. And the knock, knock is funny because you see a hand, but in the sense of not being a hand, you see a hand in the shape of a wing knocking on the door. But instead, knocking on the door for the woodpecker is pretty much what it's entitling or meant to actually save you about equality. I don't know if people have ever thought about animal rights, because I sure haven't. And it's not important because that's kind of lost in the translation too, being different from nature altogether, and there being a subspecies of insects that catch your attention and secretly nobody knows you like this sort of insect. Well, I have that sort of key thing about jewels and rocks and crystals and gems that have always given me something to fall back on in terms of something to peruse on the internet, such as birthstones. And that's where it really culminates, because I believe it's all one and the same on the internet, regardless of any superlative. The activity is pretty much what you see is what you get. And then again, it's not so much the same thing because I'm part of that internet world that you see, such as posting in forums and taking certain initiative to keep the internet that I secure full of loopholes so as not to ruin the security on my computer, enough to say that there are people in the world who give back, give a little, like a random act of kindness. Well, I don't know if you can say that, but I'd like to close with this. Computers can deliver to the client a certain sense of, and I guess that's pretty much that. And for what it's actually giving you is, computers are in itself a random act of kindness.